I'd like to welcome everyone to another evening of Awaken Your Soul and Take Control, a journey through the Tanya. So, last week we learned about the Rambam's opinion that our way of thinking obviously is not Hashem's way of thinking. God says, my way of thinking is not your way of thinking, and that everything, the knowledge, the subject, the brains, the person, everything by Hashem is one, where by us, everything is separate. You have, like I mentioned last week, you have the person learning the book, gaining the knowledge, everything is separate. Says the Rambam, by Hashem, everything is one. And that was where we left everything off. So we're going to go a little further in Tanya. We're going to get a little, maybe a little later, we'll get a little Kabbalistic. As a matter of fact, I'll start getting a little Kabbalistic to start off. And we'll continue in the Tanya inside in a minute. The neshama comes down from the Or Ein Sof. In other words, the neshama comes down here from godliness, and that's why we have from God. It's a piece of God, a piece of godliness, and that's why we have godliness within every one of ourselves. The neshama descends, comes down here. So I'm going to tell you something basically surface, and we'll, as we get into Tanya a little bit, we'll talk about this a little more. If we are down here and we are finite people with finite minds, and God, Hashem, is infinite, how do we relate to the infinite? How do we, the finite, relate to the infinite? Through a process called tzimtzum. Tzimtzum is basically means God, who can do anything, contracted himself and brought himself down to us. Now the neshama comes down to us through what we call seder hishtalshalus, the chain of descent. The chain of descent. What does that mean? This Seder Ishtalshalus, this chain of descent, means the neshama at one point is one with God. There's only God and only God, the Or Ein Sof. And the Or Ein Sof is the infinite light, which we'll speak about very soon. The neshama goes down through four spiritual worlds. Once again, we're just going to hit the surface this week and then continue with the four worlds at a different time. But I just want to give you a basic idea. The neshama comes down through four worlds. The world of Atzilus, emanation. The world of Bria, which means creation. The world of Yitzira, which means the world of formation. And then there is the world of Asiya, of action, actuality. And then it comes into this physical world. So there are four spiritual worlds that the neshama goes through. In each one of these worlds, there are what we call 10 Sefirot. The 10 Sefirot are 10 manifestations of God's power, of how he deals with the rest of the world. There are 10 manifestations of God, of Hashem. Chachma, Bina, and Das, the first three. Chachma, Bina, Das. The next 7 are called Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Netzach, Hod, Yesod, and Malchus. Now, if you think about it, Chachma Bina Das means wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. Wisdom, understanding, and knowledge. I'm not going through all 10 right now. I just will tell you the first 3 are intellect, and the other 7 are emotions. Chesed is kindness, Gevura is discipline, strength, and so on. Tiferes is beauty. Now, if you realize the acronym, the Rashi Tevis, the acronym for Chachma Bina Das is Chabad. Keep that in mind. That's, by the way, why we're called Chabad. Because the Alter Rebbe orchestrated and arranged Chabad Chassidus, Chabad philosophy, not that we go to the Rebbe to get inspired, and we get inspired, the inspiration leaves till the next time. The Alter Rebbe, the Tanya, and all the Lubavitcher Rebbes, the 7 Lubavitcher Rebbes, arranged Chabad Chassidus in a way, and their philosophy was that they inspired us and taught us how to be inspired always, to inspire ourselves. And how do we inspire ourselves? With godliness and with Avodas Hashem, service of God, through Chachma, Bina, and Das, through contemplation, through knowledge, through understanding of godliness. That's how we can always inspire ourselves. And that's why it's called Chabad Chassidus. Our philosophy is called Chabad, because of Chachma Bina Das. So really, keep one thing in mind. Chabad wasn't only you go to Alaska and look for a stand where you could buy a hot dog someplace, a kosher hot dog. You go to a Chabad stand to put on film. That is Chabad, but Chabad originated with Chachma Bina Das. Just to go through Chachma Bina Das, what exactly are they? Imagine you're talking to your wife about plans for a house, to build a new house, and you don't know how to do it or what to do, and all of a sudden, boom, you get a flash of an idea. Wow! That flash of an idea is called Chachma. Chachma, the stage of Chachma is the flash of the idea that just came to my mind. Boom! Now, what do I do with that flash? I have to start contemplating. I have to start putting it on paper, building plans. I have to chew it up, analyze it, absorb it, figure how to do it. So that's already Bina. That's already understanding. Bina is a continuation of Chachma, analyzation of Chachma. That's a better word. Again, Chachma is the flash of the idea. Bina is the analyzation and the contemplation and the planning of the Chachma. So what is actually Das knowledge? Das is putting it into action, putting it into play, taking that building plan, taking that idea, that flash, taking the analyzation, taking the contemplation, and doing what with it? We got to do something with it, putting it into action. So that's Chachma Bina Das. And each one of these worlds have their Chachma Bina Das. Now, just to throw it out right now, in Mirz Hashem, in a few weeks, just around the corner, we're going to start counting Sfiras HaOmer. Now, if you look at the Sfiras HaOmer, there is also a little piece to add. And you know what that little piece is? The manifestations of God. Chachma, Bina, Das, Chesed, Gevura, Tiferes, Chesed Shebechesed, Chesed Shebegvura, all these manifestations are included in Sfiras HaOmer. So it's not something that's just, obviously they're Kabbalistic, esoteric meanings, but it's magnificent once you get into it. So the neshama goes down through these four worlds. It begins to change until it comes down here. So it's going through the four worlds. It's going down through the 10 manifestations of God in each world. The Chochmah Bina Das Chesed Gvur Tiferes Netzach Hod Yisod Malchus in each world, and then the baby comes out. So now the Tanya, the Alter Rebbe, is going to deal with a question. If we are all a chelek Elokai mimal mamish, if we all come from the same source, from the same piece of godliness, we all have godliness in us, and if we all come from the same source, why do we all look different and think different? Why are we all different? Why the changes? We should all be the same. If we all come from the same source, let's all be the same. What's going on? Our neshamas all come from the same source. So our neshamas, our bodies, everything should all be the same. Says the Alter Rebbe inside the and even though there are tens of thousands of different levels of the souls of the neshamas, tens of thousands, gavaya mi'al gavaya lein kates, one higher than the other. So we would think that might be a contradiction, because if we're all a piece of God, why are we so different? Kemoi. Now the Alter Rebbe gives examples of different levels of souls. Kemoi gaidel mailas nishmei sa'avei sa'moshe Rabbeinu aleichem hashalom. Such as the height, the quality, the height of the neshama of our forefathers and Moshe Rabbeinu. Al neshama yisarasenu ela de ikvasa de Mashiach. Imagine the neshamas of Moshe Rabbeinu, Avram Avinu, Yaacov Avinu, David HaMelech, right? Compare them to the neshamas, to our neshamas of our generation. It's a little different, right? They're like the top, the heads, and we're like the heels. That's what the Alter Rebbe says. It's not my line. I wish it was my line. It's not my line. He says, Alter Rebbe says, if you really think about the levels of Moshe Rabbeinu's soul, Avram Avinu's soul, the souls of our great sages, compared to our souls, they're like the heads, and we're like the heels. What does it mean, like the heels? What does that exactly mean? I'll tell you in a second. When I went to high school, we were always taught in the secular studies that every generation is greater than the previous generation. That in the secular world, one generation, the further the generation is, the greater there are from the previous generation. According to the Torah, that's just the opposite. According to the Torah, that's just the opposite. According to the Torah, there is something called Yeridas Haderes, the weakening and the going down of generations. What does that mean? The weakening of the generations. What are they weakened? What are we called, my friends? We are called Ikvesa de Mashiach. We are the heels, the footsteps to Mashiach, the heels, it's called. Why are we the heels? I'll tell you why we are the heels compared to other generations. Take a pot of boiling water. Stick your finger in it. Is it going to burn you? 100%. 100% it's going to burn. Take your heel, just the heel, and stick it into the hot water. It's not going to burn you as much. You know why? Because you have on the heel a lot of dead skin. It's not sensitive. Why is our generation called the heel of Mashiach before Mashiach comes? Because we become less sensitive. Our sensitivity to godliness is less. So in simple yeshiva, they learn Ikvus of the Mashiach means we're the generation before Mashiach comes, which is true. Speedily in our days. But it also means, why is it called Ikvisa, Akev, a heel? Because we are the heels compared to the other generations, because we have less sensitivity to godliness. And that's what Yeridas Hadeiros means. And that's what the Alter Rebbe says is, Sheheim bechinas akabayim mamish legabe amayach v'arosh. We are like the heels, the actual heels compared to the other generations, which are the intellect, the brains, and the head. And not only that, not only do we compare far away generations, but the chein, and also bechol dar vadar, in every single generation, yesh roshei alfei Yisrael, there are the heads of the nation. Shenishmeisem and bechinas reish v'mayach. Their neshamas are the heads and the brains of that generation, the leaders of that generation. Legabe neshamais, compared to the neshamais hahamayim va'ami haaretz, to everyone else. So we, compared to our leaders of today, we are the heels, and they are the heads and the brain of their generation. Their neshamas are on a much higher madrega than ours. Now, if you think about it, about the leaders in Hasidic circles, what do they call their leader? A Rebbe. A Rebbe. What does Rebbe stand for? Rebbe is an acronym for Rosh B'nai Yisrael, the head of the B'nai Yisrael. Because they are the leaders, and they are the heads, and their neshamas are on a much higher madrega than ours. Now, not only that, says Alter Rebbe, v'chein, and also nefashos, the gabi nefashos, even when comparing souls of higher souls with souls of lower souls, there are so many differences between the quality of the souls. Even the basic soul, which you might imagine to be equal in people, are really different. So now the Tanya brings down the Zohar, which says as follows: Ki chol nefesh, every single soul, klula includes, it contains 3 layers. One is nefesh, ruach, and neshama. Really, there are 5 layers to a soul. There is nefesh, ruach, neshama, chaya, and yechida, which are very high. The Balatanya and Tanya will right now speak about, very often you'll find him speaking about these 3. The nefesh, ruach, and neshama, because the nefesh, ruach, and neshama applies to every Jew. Chaya and yechida is completely different levels, very high levels, and we'll discuss that at a different time. So every soul has 3 levels. One is the nefesh, which is the intelligence of the body. Ruach, which is the emotional intelligence. So you have the body, the actions, and you have emotions. or neshama, and you have this self-conscious intelligence. So it's an amazing concept that the Zohar brings down, that every neshama has different layers also. But even though, says the Alter Rebbe now, that even though every soul is on a different level, and there are tens of thousands of levels of souls in every single generation, not only from our generation compared to the generation of yesteryear, but even in our own generation, in our own communities, in our own cities, with our own neighbors, says Alter Rebbe, Mikol Malka, nevertheless, Sheidesh Kol Nefesh Ruach Neshama. Nevertheless, the root of every Nefesh Ruach Neshama, every one of these layers, Meireish Kol HaMadregas, from the very highest level of the soul, Atzav Kol Dargan HaMalubash Beguf Amei Ha'arz V'Kasha B'Kalim, to the lowest of the lowest of the lowest. Nimshach mimayach ha'elyon sheichachma ilah kaviyachol. It comes from, the root is, it comes from the highest divine energies of the supernal brain, which we call chachma ilah, supernal wisdom. Where do we find supernal wisdom? Let's go and drop back what I started off today with the introduction to the four worlds. The highest world was Atzilus. In Atzilus, you have, what's the first manifestation called? Chachma. So everyone is connected to Chachma the Atzilus. Chachma of the world of Atzilus. Which means, see, these four spiritual worlds are worlds that we can already relate to. We can relate to those worlds in some shape or form. Above those worlds, there's the Ein Sof, the infinite light, which, if you remember, it's not God. It's the infinite light, the godliness of God. If you remember the parable we gave last week and the week before. It's the godliness, the Ein Sof. The sunlight is, remember I told you, the sunlight is not necessarily the sun. The sunlight is a manifestation and an expression of the sun. And that's higher than Atzilus, which we cannot relate to at all. I happen to enjoy a parable when I explain the four worlds. I look at the four worlds as the process of pregnancy. It's like pregnancy. Why? Because if you have the Olam Atzilus, we can relate to it as a something. But we don't know what it is. There's something there in the higher world. We can't relate to it. We don't know, but we see something there. If you go one world below Atzilus, the world of creation, there's already a creation there. There's something you can really talk about now. There's no more it. There's a creation there. If you go one step down, the world of Yetzirah, formation, wow, it's being formed into something. The neshama is being formed into something. And then you go into Olam Asiyah, the fourth world, that's the world of action, actuality. Now, let's go into pregnancy. Right when a woman is pregnant, let her take an ultrasound, you'll see a drop of something there, you're not going to be able to relate to it. It's something, it's a it. You can't relate to it. Go a few months later, it's becoming a creation. That's the next world, Olam Abriya. Go a few months later, oh my gosh, miracle of God. You see formation, the hands, the fisalach, the feet. Wow, that's amazing. And then when the baby comes out, that's already the world of actuality. That's how I like to compare it to. Kimoshel haben animshach mimayel cha'av. That we come from the mind, the brain of our parents. She'afilu tziparnei raglov nishavo metibazo mamish. We come from the brain of our father, that even our toenails, the lowest part of our body, our toenails, they come from that little drop of seed. Because that small drop of seed for 9 months was in the womb of its mother. And it went down from level to level, from all the 4 worlds. It changed and it became something. Even not only it became a brain, not only it became from that seed, that little drop of seed became the arms and the legs and the kishkas, the intestines, even the smallest part of the body, even the toenails came from that seed. The im calls there, nevertheless, Aideno kshura umyuchedes b'yichud nivla v'atzah b'mahus v'atzmus v'arishan shehoisa tipas mayachaav. But even after that child is born, that small toenail of the small toe, that little toenail is still bound and created from the brain of the father where that drop came from. The Gam Akshav, and even now, in the child, Yenikas at Tzipernayim v'chayusom nimshechas mimayach shebereish. It's still the nurturing of that little toenail still comes from the brain that's in its head. Why? Because that comes from the father. That's part of the father, that brain. And just like that drop was from the father, same thing now, that toenail is being nurtured from the brain of the child. Like it says in the Gemara, and the Talmud, Luban the Talmud states that the white seed of the father, from which the bones and the nails are formed, that the clothing of Adam Arishan, Adam, in Gan Eden, in paradise, they were clothes of, the Medrash tells us, nails. It was nails attached to his body. They were nails. V'koch, I just want to finish this. V'koch mamish kaviyachol. B'sherish kol nefesh ruch neshama shal klolus yisrael l'mayla b'yiridasim imadrega l'madrega al yidei ishtalshelush ha'olam es datzilus priya yitzira asiyah b'chachmasa yizbarech. No matter how low a person is, just like a person is always, no matter, even he's so low, the lowest part of a person's body, even his small toe, the toenail of his small toe, is still connected to his father. The same thing, we are also connected to our fathers, and we are always connected to the brains, even this small little toenail, which means, very simple, no matter how low a person is, he's always still connected. Why? Because just like a child is, like I told you, is a copy of his parents and has their DNA, and even in his toenail, there is the DNA of his parents, even in that small little toenail, the same thing, the lowest of the lowest Jew still is from the DNA. He has in himself the DNA from Hashem, from that godliness. He's all the way up And we're all the way down. But imagine this. If you go up, you take a tour in New York, and you want to go up to the Empire State Building, you go up to the roof. And you take this long, long chain, and you drop it down, and you're holding it from the top. And your friend is standing all the way in the bottom, and all of a sudden it drops down. And he grabs it. You can't see him. He can't see you. You can't even feel each other. But you know what? You're still both connected. You're still both connected with that chain. Allah has come and come, how much more so? That this isn't only a chain that connects us, that it is part of Hashem's godliness. It's part of his DNA that he blew into us. It's part of his mind, his supernal wisdom, his Chachmei Ilah. Wow! How connected we are. Not only connected, we have that intimacy, that intimate connection with God. All we have to do is want that connection. It's right there. Open up our eyes, open up our hearts, and grab on to that godliness, and that connection is there. I want to finish with one question, and we'll continue Mitzvah next week. The question is about these four worlds. Where exactly are they? Where exactly are they? You're not going to be able to see them with a telescope, and you're not going to be able to study about them, in science, because they're not a place. They're right here with us. So what exactly are they? Stay tuned to next week, Emir Hashem. I want to thank everyone for joining us tonight. I want to wish everyone a Freilich Purim, a Purim Sameach. Always remember one thing. Not only this week should be simcha and joy in your lives, but it should be a ganz Yar Freilach. It should be joy and simcha a whole year. Have a good night and be well. And once again, thank you for joining.